Okay, my name is Robert SanGeorge, and I will be your presenter this evening in a discussion about advanced strategies and tactics for searching for jobs. I want to tell you up front that this presentation is mainly designed for graduate students and seniors. If you're younger than that, fine, happy to have you here. But really, it's designed for people who are looking to find jobs either immediately. It's also designed for recent alumni, I should say, too. But in any case, it's mainly intended for people who are either now looking for jobs, soon to be looking for jobs, or perhaps going to be looking for jobs this coming May in 2022. And my background is that I've been a career advisor at AU since '08. Okay, so that's a long time, 13 years or so, and primarily for the last 10 years with the School of Public Affairs, advising primarily graduate students. And prior to that, I had a long career abroad with the United Nations and some major NGOs, particularly World Wildlife Fund at their international headquarters, and some other things. Also did work in the United States, in case you're wondering why it is I'm advising people who are mostly looking for jobs in the United States. So let's keep going here. Oh, and by the way, interrupt me at any time. Everybody's microphone is muted except mine, because we have learned through hard experience that it's not a good idea to unmute a lot of people and then listen to their dogs barking and an ambulance is going by their house and things like that. So I have opened both the Q&A and the chat windows. You can ask questions in either one of those via keyboard chat. And interrupt me at any time. If you ask a question about something that I'm going to be discussing soon, I will tell you to just please be patient, but otherwise happy to just answer the question immediately. Now, this discussion, this is what we're going to be talking about. I'm a believer in telling people what we're going to cover and then covering it. We're going to talk about how to think strategically in your job search. What is the optimal time frame during various parts of the year for searching for jobs? A little bit about where in the world you want to be, particularly in the United States. Also, we're gonna do a little amateur psychologizing about what kind of job hunter are you. We're not going to ask each one of you to talk about that. It's just going to be me discussing it. We're going to talk about, in particular, people who really know what they want to do in a narrow sense, which is not a bad thing necessarily. Or are you someone who wants to cast a wide net for potentially a lot of different jobs? We're going to talk a bit about LinkedIn versus Indeed, and also something about Twitter, which can be a way to link with employers and occasionally even find jobs. And a little bit about AU Handshake, which most of you are probably somewhat familiar with. Now, first of all, what is your optimal time for job searching? Let's talk about that a bit. If you are going to be graduating this coming May, as I suspect some of you are, you pretty much want to be into a serious job hunt by January or February at the latest. And I say that, no matter how heavy your academic load is going to be, obviously there are limits. And if you're an undergrad and you're going to be taking 18 credit hours, well, and you're also working a part-time job at Starbucks, you might not have a lot of time to look for jobs. But what really kind of pains me, really, in a sympathetic way, is when I hear from people who are going to be graduating, say in May, and they come and see me in April or in May, or even after that in the summertime, and say that, well, they didn't really have enough time to search for jobs because their academic load was so heavy in the spring. I understand that. If that's a decision you have to make, that's fine. But you are almost certainly extending the time when you are not going to have a job that is professionally relevant to you, okay? As opposed to some kind of interim fill-in where you make some money, working at a restaurant or Bed Bath & Beyond or Starbucks or whatever. Now, do you, and also let me cover the other times of the year. if you're an upcoming December graduate, you need to start looking for jobs now. I mean, today, if possible, certainly by tomorrow. Really important to get going. The optimal time for a December graduate to start looking for jobs is actually September and October and into November. Once we hit Thanksgiving week, not surprisingly, you'll see a decrease in job postings because people go on vacation. But that will then come back. It will bounce back for the first 2 or so weeks of December. And then we go into the holiday season from Christmas all the way through New Year's, and even usually a week after New Year's, where people are often still on vacation. That's, close to a 3-week period when you can expect there won't be a lot of postings, but you should still keep looking. I mean, I had a job interview once on Christmas Eve for a job, and I got the job. And by the way, it was one of the worst jobs I ever had, but that's a separate issue. There I was interviewing on Christmas Eve, and there was almost nobody in the office except for me and the person who was going to be my supervisor. And I think he was impressed that I was willing to come out on Christmas Eve to interview. But in any case, things like that can happen. So keep up your search no matter what. If you're an August graduate, a little bit different, you should probably start looking no later than, say, March of the previous March or April, something like that. There also are some exceptions to this. If you're looking for a job with a consulting firm, a management consulting firm, especially like, say, Deloitte, okay? Those kinds of firms and other parts of the corporate world often recruit people far ahead of time. They will often be recruiting candidates whom they want to hire in May, and they start recruiting them, and I should say interviewing them, which is part of recruitment, of course, in October, in November, in December. So you want to think way ahead of time. Another type of job where you want to be thinking significantly ahead of time, even further, is if you're looking for a job in the federal government or with a federal contractor that requires a security clearance. Typically, security clearances, even at the lowest level, which is called secret level, are 4 to 6 month deals, usually closer to 6 months. Meaning something like this. Let's say you applied a month ago for a job with a federal contractor, and they decide to start interviewing you. And after a week or two of 2 or 3 rounds, maybe 4 rounds of interviews, they make what's known as a contingent offer, contingent upon you passing the security clearance. Then you're kind of on ice at that point. You're not working. Most of the time, they are not going to let you start working, even on just non-classified materials, until you get that clearance. And that could be something like 6 months. If it's a higher level clearance, for example, if you're shooting for the CIA or the DIA or NSA, the really top agency. I mean, CIA security clearances typically are 12 to 15 months because it's a lot higher than secret level. And they have their own security level classification system. And so you'd better think about what you're going to do in the interim if you are seriously pursuing one of those big agencies in the intelligence community. That would also apply in most cases to the FBI, which is Homeland Security, not intelligence, but still same kind of rules apply. And certain other parts of DHS, like the National Counterterrorism Center, and places like that. I don't want to go too far into national security because this is not a national security presentation, national security jobs presentation. But you do want to be thinking way ahead of time. If you're, for example, a graduate student and you're going to be receiving your degree in May 2023, you want to apply at least a year ahead of time to, say, the CIA, for example. Now, they may reject you. They may decide not to interview you, maybe because you don't have your degree yet and you're not as appealing a candidate yet. But there is no problem with coming back a year later and applying again. They don't hold that against you, so to speak, okay? And so that's just a word of the wise, particularly about security clearances. Moving down to the second bullet point, where do you want to work? That's another issue you got to think about. Are you talking about DC, meaning the district, Maryland, or Northern Virginia, okay? Or other cities in the United States? which, in which, different issues come about? Or are you thinking about even trying to work internationally? Do you have another passport, which makes it a lot easier? If you have a passport for a European Union country, theoretically, you can work anywhere in the European Union without a hassle, more or less. There are some exceptions to that. How can you narrow your search parameters? If you're what I call a wide net person looking for a lot of different jobs in different areas, it may be too unfocused a search. On one hand, I usually encourage people to go broader rather than narrower because they're more likely to get a job sooner. But there is such a thing as thinking too broadly. We'll discuss more of that later on in the presentation. Are you already working at a relevant job? Then you've got to, whether it's a part-time job or even potentially an internship, although really I'm thinking more of a job. What are your prospects there? Are there prospects for being promoted? Should you be talking to your supervisor about that? Those are things that should be going through your mind. And then finally, what are the best tools for your specific job search? So let's dive deeper into all of this. I've already covered a lot of this about May grads, August grads, December grads, and management consulting firms also be thinking 8 to 9 months ahead of time. And also with firms like that, as with a lot of employers, it's very much to your advantage to be trying to get an internship with that employer so that they get to know you. I'll tell you candidly that, firms, management consulting firms, the Deloittes of the world and places like that, they often use internships as a proving ground. And if they like you and they like your work ethic and your smarts and what you've been able to do as an intern, you're way more likely to be considered seriously for a permanent position, probably a year later, maybe 6 months later. And again, with intelligence and homeland security, you've got to be thinking a year to sometimes 18 months ahead because of the security clearance issue. And what that mainly means is applying earlier, as well as thinking about what your interim plan is for work while you're waiting for that security clearance. Also, another thing is, and I especially offer this thought to seniors, can you plan to take a lighter academic load in your last semester? Is it possible you might only need 9 credit hours to graduate as a senior, okay? Usually graduate students don't have that much flexibility in terms of lighter academic loads, unless you are extending your time in graduate school by an additional semester, for example. I've often seen students who were working nearly full-time or full-time who ended up taking 2.5, sometimes 3 years to get their master's degree. And then what they often do is, and that's because they're already working, but then in that last semester, maybe they're only taking 1 graduate level course and they've got a lot of time to look for other jobs simultaneously, okay? So these are just other things to be thinking about if you have the flexibility, which not everybody does, and most people don't, quite honestly. What are the best times in general for searching? January through June, really good times for looking, and September up to Thanksgiving. So really it's that period, Thanksgiving to New Year's, which is not a barren wasteland for job postings, but it's not necessarily the best time to be looking for a job. And July also can be okay. I probably should have said January to July. August can be a slow month when a lot of people are on vacation and just oftentimes not as many job postings, depending upon the field that you're thinking of going into. So where do you want to be? Is it only the DMV area? If it's other cities. Now, this is really important. If you want a job in the DMV, and let's say you're an online student, I don't know, some of you may be online students, you're not living anywhere near DC, you need to use a DC address on your resume. And I tell that for everybody. Don't list 2 addresses. Don't list your parents' address in Illinois or wherever, and your apartment in DC. List 1 address, and if you're looking for a job in this area, list a DC area address. Could be in Maryland, could be in Northern Virginia. Doesn't have to be in the district. Now, if you're an online student and you're not living anywhere near here, however, you still want to use a DC address. And my suggestion would be AU's address, 4400 Massachusetts Avenue, Washington, DC. Okay, 4400 Mass Ave, Washington, DC. Now, other cities, if you're looking for a job in New York, you need a New York address, or a New York area. Maybe it could be New Jersey or Connecticut near the city, but you need that kind of an address, whether it's family or friends. Really important. Why is this so important? For virtually any employer in any city, but especially really big cities where there are a lot of job candidates. So employers, have a lot of choice. It's important because employers have a clear preference for people who are in their own area. Okay. It's really only when you start moving toward middle management or a highly specialized job that's in demand where employers are more willing to consider you if you don't live in the same area. I mean, my own personal example was that I started out with a global company and was promoted or moved around about 6 times in 4 years to different cities in the US. And then made a move to New York from DC, but I was recruited, I was headhunted out, and then finally went abroad. But that was when I was well into my career and I had certain skills that employer really wanted, and they were willing to move me and my family and all that expense from at that time near New York City to Geneva, Switzerland. So, your ability to move around can be limited by where you are, and if at all possible, you want to be using local addresses. If you are, I occasionally run into students who, for example, are from California and they want to go back there. Well, then you should use your family's address in California, okay? Or a friend's address or whatever. This is really important to do. And to make sure your cover letter says the same thing about your address, by the way. Now, it can be challenging to work outside the United States. This is not a webinar about working internationally. I could probably do a whole webinar on that, but what I'm going to say is, if you don't have a passport from that country or some kind of residency permit, it can be really difficult to work there, especially if we're talking about European Union or any other developed country, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, not to mention, by the way, COVID restrictions. It's almost impossible to get into Australia and New Zealand right now for any reason, although I heard that Australia was opening up recently. There was a time during the pandemic when all but one European Union country just banned Americans from coming for any reason at all. And then they eased up in terms of tourism, but in terms of working, you still face the regular obstacles. It's as hard to get a job outside the US if you are not in a STEM field, meaning science, technology, engineering, math. What are there huge shortages of? Computer engineers, physicians, nurses, just to name a few, and a lot of different, if I didn't say engineers, aside from computer engineering, other kinds of engineering. Those are people who oftentimes can fairly easily get residency permits because there's a shortage of those kind of people in Europe, in the United States, in Canada, and other developed countries. So it can be a lot easier to get into those with that kind of degree. I suspect that most of you are not in that category. And if you're not, it's not impossible, but it is a challenge to get into those countries. It's not, oh, I'll look for a job in France and I'll get a job. And of course, then there's the language issue, okay? In Europe, okay, there's the UK and Ireland, right? And beyond that, yes, a lot of English is spoken in Scandinavian countries, but to get a job there, they want you to speak Swedish or Norwegian or Finnish or whatever, Danish. It's important to them and really difficult. I mean, a member of my family works in Paris for a multinational French firm. He is fully fluent in French, and if he hadn't been, I'm not so sure he would have gotten the job, even though he has very high level technology skills that they wanted for the job. So, there's all these things to consider. research is necessary to understand the differences also in resumes. European resumes are different than American resumes. And by the way, outside the United States, everybody they don't use the word resume. They use the word CV, all right? Short for curriculum vitae. In the United States, CV typically means an academic resume where you're trying for typically a teaching position in higher education. And it will be very long. It'll have a list of papers that you've written, especially anything you've published. I mean, it'll be very long on your research products. And but outside the U.S., when they say CV, they mean resume. And regular old resumes, let's just call them all resumes, not to confuse you. In Europe, in most European countries, they want more detail. They are less put off by longer resumes. They oftentimes want a little headshot of you embedded in the upper right or left hand corner of the resume, and they want to know how old you are. Those things are illegal for an employer to ask in the United States because of the potential for racial or ethnic discrimination, age discrimination, gender discrimination, et cetera. Those kind of protections largely don't exist in Europe, at least when it comes to resumes, okay? And they may be asking you for that. But in general, even if you were applying for a job, say in Europe, you'd want to think about, maybe you don't want to put a headshot in, or maybe you don't want to tell them how old you are. But you'd want to think about more detail in your resume because they are looking for that typically in Europe, for example. That's how it differs. And you're going to want to do some research because there's even some differences from one European country to the other. They're not all the same that way. What is your strategy for getting a first interview outside of the USA? This used to be hard to persuade people to do, and for obvious reasons, it's not difficult at all anymore, which is you offer to do a Zoom or a Skype or a Microsoft Teams video call. Probably 98% of the time, even employers in DC are going to tell you to do a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams call for your first round interview. A lot of people are also, by the way, a lot of employers want to do phone interviews initially. What that typically means is, so you've applied for a job and they say, okay, we want to interview you on the phone. It'll be a member of our HR office who is going to interview you for up to 30 minutes. Typically, it's going to be like 15 minutes. And the challenge there is when you're interviewing, all they have to go on is your voice, as well as obviously the content of what you're saying. But you need to maintain a complete, upbeat, energetic manner for the entire time because you want to seem likable and energetic. Who would hire someone who is not energetic and not upbeat? All right, think about it that way. And so that's hard to get across in a phone interview because it's just your voice, but you do the best you can and go from there. And on a Zoom call or Microsoft Teams, whichever, same thing. But at least you have the advantage of them being able to see you from about, upper chest up, right? And by the way, don't fall into the mythology that, oh, since we're all being interviewed at home, I don't have to dress up. Now, I'm not dressed up for this session, but you're not interviewing me for a job, okay? So what that means is, any kind of Zoom call that involves an employer, men should be wearing coats and ties, and women, dressed appropriately. I'm not going to offer fashion advice for women. My wife would laugh her head off about that. But business-like attire. Doesn't matter, whether you're wearing pajamas, pajama bottoms, I should say. But up top, you got to look professional, as if you were walking into an office with professional business attire. Okay. Yeah, so that's that. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to keep going here. So what kind of a job hunter are you? Remember, I was talking a little bit about this earlier. Are you someone who does not yet have a well-defined career focus, or do you have a really good career focus? I mean, I see, even among graduate students who are pursuing specific graduate programs, I see both kinds of people, okay? Or are you somewhere in between? Do you have one or two ideas that you might be focused on, but you might be open to other things. You need to think about this first before developing your strategy. Wide net casters, questions you need to ask yourself. Do I want to work for the federal government or a state government or a municipal government? Okay. Do I want to work for a federal contractor? There's a lot of opportunities in federal contracting in the DC area. Do I want to work in the nonprofit community? Do I want to be working in advocacy? Do I want to be working in some kind of charitable context that's not advocacy, like the American Red Cross or AARP, which are the two biggest nonprofit organizations in the United States, by the way. Nonprofit community is a very large sector, especially in DC, in the DMV, because we are ground zero for the headquarters of so many major nonprofit organizations. However, the compensation can vary tremendously. And basically the rule of thumb is bigger the nonprofit organization, higher the salary, and vice versa, all right? So think about that. If you're looking at a small nonprofit organization, you can expect that the salary is going to be lower. I mean, no question about it. And the benefits won't be as good. You'll be paying higher deductibles for your health insurance and higher copays when you go to the doctor. And the 401k employer match is going to be small or maybe close to non-existent with a smaller employer. And they might tell you, oh, you have to work here for an entire year and contribute to a 401k program before you get vested in the program and are able to actually benefit from it. Those kind of things are annoying and they exist. Are you thinking of the corporate sector? In this area, in the DC area, that often means, for example, consulting firms. Real major corporations in this area that are not federal contractors, not primarily federal contractors. I mean, I can think of one, Marriott Corporation, which I think is out in Bethesda at their headquarters. And they actually do some federal contracting, but they're not primarily a federal contractor. They've just got hotels and resorts all over the world. There are other, there's other really big employers here like Lockheed Martin, but that's mostly a defense contractor, okay? They mostly wouldn't exist if it weren't for the federal government. I mean, I would suspect 90% of their businesses, it comes from the federal government. And there are others, but again, corporate sector presents more limited opportunities in DC. So how should you be connecting with job leads? By the way, I probably didn't explain this at the beginning, but we're kind of doing what I would call an inverted pyramid. We're starting out speaking more broadly, and we're focusing in on the kind of very specific advice that I believe you'll find very useful in terms of your job search. Networking receptions. These days, they're all virtual. And that's unfortunate because pre-pandemic, we meaning the AU Career Center, as well as the Kogan Career Center, we're doing probably 8 or 10 in-person networking receptions per year. For those of you who are not business students, there were probably 6 or 7 of these where representatives would show up from various in-demand employers, in demand from AU, people who are graduating from AU or recently graduated. And there'd be some fairly decent hors d'oeuvre food. And you could spend 2 hours mingling in a crowd and making some good contacts. And unfortunately, we just can't do that. It's prohibited both by university rules and by the District of Columbia right now. So the best we can do is a virtual kind of thing where employers will make brief presentations, oftentimes in a panel. You'll be able to ask questions pretty much the way you can ask questions here with chat. And there may be some opportunities, maybe, I can't speak of every one of these things, to sign up for some individual sessions with people. Another thing that's going on, though, that you should know about is that, for example, the Maine AU Career Center offers opportunities to sign up for individual Zoom meetings, basically, or Microsoft Teams with various employers, ranging from intelligence agencies to businesses to nonprofits, et cetera. And those are, by the way, those, where are they? They're all in Handshake. You go to Handshake, you look on the left side of the main page, and you will see something called Fairs, F-A-I-R-S, and another one called Events. Click on each of those individually and look down the list of what's scheduled and see what you're interested in. In addition, all of you are getting an email every week from the Maine AU Career Center about upcoming events. One of those emails just went out yesterday talking about a lot of different things coming up soon. Opportunities to talk individually with employers in a one-on-one setting, but remotely, as well as larger events, etc. We, as you may know, we had a job and internship fair remote probably about 3 weeks ago, and we'll be having at least one and probably two more, maybe even three during the year. Good opportunities to meet and greet with employers, albeit remotely. And again, go to Handshake, go to events, click on that, and there'll be a chronological list of upcoming events. and go to click on fairs, and that will involve job fairs as well as some things that are related to job fairs. Alumni Fire, that's the address for it. What is Alumni Fire? It has nothing to do with being fired, by the way. It has to do with connecting with alumni. Alumni Fire is essentially an information exchange, and it's a database of, if I remember correctly, I'm forgetting whether it's 2,000 or 3,000 alumni who have volunteered to mentor AU students in seeking jobs or internships, for that matter. You go to it and you search. I, generally speaking, would not search by major or by graduate degree. I would search by employer. Who do they work for? Who is relevant? That's relevant to you. Now, these employers, these people who work for employers who are AU alumni, they set a limit on how many students they will work with for any 1 month period. Typically, it's 3 students or 5 students, and you can understand why. These people have full-time jobs, and they've got to have some kind of limit as to how much they're going to work with students. So the worst that could happen to you is that maybe someone you want to talk to is booked up this month, but won't be booked up next month. It's a really good resource, and I would urge you to take advantage of it. And we are recruiting more and more alumni all the time to participate. It's grown tremendously in, I think we've only had it running at about 18 months, maybe 2 years, something like that. Informational interviewing is useful. It is time consuming. Never try to turn an informational interview into a pitch for a job. It really annoys people a lot, and it probably nixes the point of you getting a job at a particular employer. It's informational only. How do you do it? Use contacts that you already have. Contact HR departments, human resources departments of employers, etc. And of course, another big way to find out about jobs is using job boards, and we'll be getting more specifically into that. But first, I want to talk about, think about this process for how you would focus your search, your search, okay? First of all, what do I want to be? That's a big question. Some of you don't know that yet, but you've got to try to come up with some reasonable, 2 or 3 reasonable alternative scenarios as to what you want to be doing with your life. Also, where do you want to be, okay? What kind of a job do I want to be working at? Am I an extroverted person who wants to be out there talking to people? These days, mostly remotely, but eventually probably in person. Or are you introspective and research focused? And do you want to mainly be doing research, on a computer, working with a team of people? You're not just all alone all day, but, more of a job that is less completely involved with working with other people and making contacts outside of your employer, things like that. What is the link between my degree and a job? This is a question especially for graduate students, okay? And for undergrads, for especially for seniors who are listening tonight, before you go to grad school, you want to be able to answer that question, not necessarily perfectly, but pretty well. What would be the link between the graduate degree I'm thinking about and the career that I want to pursue? And for those of you who are grad students who have already made that choice, you want to think in an even more focused way about where that's going to lead job-wise, if you haven't already, which many grad students have. What employment sector do I want to target? Is it the corporate world? Is it the nonprofit world? Is it federal contractors? Is it government at a federal or state or municipal level? Those are the broad questions. Am I more comfortable with a small employer that might be a more homey atmosphere and more friendly possibly and less bureaucratic? Or do I really want the support that people get more extensively from a large employer, which may be more bureaucratic, but typically there are rules and regulations and people follow them, and it's a less fuzzy situation in many cases. What are my salary expectations? The best way, by the way, to start to figure out what are reasonable salary expectations is to go to glassdoor.com. Glassdoor, you can search Glassdoor for, public policy research assistant, and it will come up with suggestions about what employers pay who are employing public policy research assistants, or any other kind of job. But what are my reasonable salary expectations? Because you want to be down to earth on that. You don't just want to be guessing. I think I want to make $75,000 a year, and then you find out that a senior who's graduating, who doesn't have much experience outside of internships in this area, is likely to be making more like $40,000 or $45,000 a year, not $75,000. And sometimes that comes as a big shock to people, and it shouldn't. You want to be working off real world, fact-based expectations. You also maybe want to be, not maybe, you definitely want to be thinking about specific employers. And I don't mean that you should narrow your search to 5, specific kinds of employers, but you want to be thinking about what are the specific employers I want to deal with, I want to target, and also who competes with them. Who else should I be thinking of among these employers that I want to target? Then, again, remember, we're doing this as kind of an iterative step-by-step process. Then you want to find relevant job postings, and we'll talk in a little bit about where and how to do that. The most important thing about a job search, aside from having a really good resume and being able to do pretty good interviews, is to organize your job search so that you are seeing jobs, if at all possible, jobs that you want, within 48 hours of no later of the time that they were posted online. And then when you see something you want to apply to, if at all possible, you drop everything and you apply right there and then. There is only one employer that you don't have to worry about working that quickly on, and that's the federal government. If you apply for a federal job, and let's say today, and whatever date it is, it's October 12th, and let's say the deadline is October 31st. You really don't have to worry about applying until October 31st, although you probably shouldn't procrastinate, because federal agencies will not look at even one candidate, won't review their resume until November 1st. Let's put it that way, until after October 31st. They're very strict and very by the book. That is the only employer you can count on to be that way, probably also state governments and maybe municipal governments. But outside the government sector, employers will often cut corners. And here's how it really works. Employers are typically told by their legal counsel that when they post a job, that posting needs to be up for at least 2 weeks to comply with equal opportunity employment guidelines, barring discrimination in various ways, okay? And, but an employer can put that up, but they can still start selecting people to interview after 3 days if they wanted, and they could even start interviewing in less than a week from the time they put up their description. The only thing they're really advised not to do is don't hire anybody until that 2 week period is over, okay? So, and by the way, nonprofit organizations are infamous for doing this. If they want to work fast and there's a vacancy and it's really hurting them to have that vacancy, they will move quickly. So you need to move quickly too, and just assume all of the time, except for government jobs, particularly federal government, that an employer is going to move fast. Now, they might not. You might not hear from an employer until 3 months later. Don't complain to me, please, if that happens. But you want to be, as I said, you see a job you want to apply for it, you apply immediately if at all possible. And if you can't do it right there and then because you're about to go off to a class or go to work or whatever, get back to it several hours later. But don't put it off till the next day. And absolutely do not do what I occasionally hear students tell me they do. Well, if I see a job on a Wednesday, I have a lot more time on the weekend. So I get the application in on Saturday or Sunday. That is just deadly, because what's happening is most employers are asking you to send them an email, right, with an attachment. By waiting 3 days, for example, as I mentioned in that example, you are falling down an email queue. And for entry-level jobs or jobs that are just a little bit above entry level, you're likely to be the 150th, 175th, even 200th person to apply for a job if you're applying 5 or 7 days after a job was posted, okay? Or actually, let me amend that. If you're applying 5 or 7 days after that kind of first 48 hours, all right? You don't want to do that. You want to be applying quickly. And in particular, you really want to get that application in before you go to sleep that night, so that if possible, it's in that email queue the next morning when somebody at an employer opens it up. Okay. And also you need to have your search organized, first of all, so that you're seeing these jobs within 48 hours of the time they've been posted. That means setting up email alerts in LinkedIn and potentially in other job boards. That means regular bookmarking of specific employers whose individual job boards you want to check out. That's the kind of thing it means. Also, it means if there are other kinds of ways you're looking for jobs, for example, Twitter accounts, you want to be doing that kind of checking regularly. Not necessarily every day, but certainly fairly frequently. Again, so that you're seeing things quickly after they are posted and then applying very quickly. Another aspect of this is you don't fiddle with cover letters. I hear too many times from too many students that, well, you want me to apply, right after I see a job, but it takes me 3 days to get a cover letter done because I have to keep coming back to it. And this is the phrase people use, and making it perfect. And the answer is no. A cover letter does not need to be perfect. A cover letter needs to have no typos, no misspellings, no grammatical errors, no run-on sentences, etc. And it needs to be mildly persuasive, but it does not need to be perfect. You are not writing the great American novel. You are not writing an op-ed for the Washington Post. You are writing a cover letter that's probably 4 paragraphs long, less is more, with no paragraphs longer than 7 lines, okay? And about 4 paragraphs, maybe 5. Who's going to read a long cover letter? The answer is not very many people. That's why less is more when it comes to cover letters. And one other thing is, research shows that 80, maybe 90% of the time, most employers don't even read a cover letter when they are deciding whether or not to give you an interview. It's only after they've decided to give you an interview that they will read that cover letter before or during your interview, okay? So cover letters are purely secondary. Do not delay your application for a cover letter. Have a template that you're working from, customize it a bit and get it out. And when you've applied to enough jobs, what's going to happen is, and I know this because it's happened to me in the distant past, I haven't looked for a job in over a decade, but you'll be looking at a job posting and you'll say, wow, that job's a lot like a job I applied to 10 days ago. You will pull up that cover letter, tweak it probably for 2 minutes, and then you're done with that cover letter. And then maybe you want to tweak your resume a little bit, and go from there. I'm going to pause for this question. How much time should we spend tailoring resumes to the job? Should we prioritize making the resumes match the job descriptions or getting the resume sent out to avoid falling behind the email queue? Okay, you do need, good question. So should you be fiddling a lot with your resume in a way that delays your application? The answer is no, you shouldn't need to. How do you customize your resume for an employer? Here's what you do. On one side of your screen, you put the job posting. On the other side, you put your resume. Then you say to yourself, what are the key things that they're looking for? What are the key words and phrases? Okay. Strong research and analytical skills, advanced Excel skills, bilingual Spanish. I mean, I'm just making things up here, right? Etc. And then you look at your skill set and you say, where does that match? That can also help you decide whether or not you want to apply for the job, by the way. If they say mandatory bilingual Spanish and you don't speak Spanish, well, forget about it, obviously. But if it's, a lot of times I will see foreign languages are preferred, but not mandatory, in which case I would usually encourage you to apply, probably, all other things being equal. But that's where you want to be tweaking your resume and having your resume reflect the language of the job description. So if it says advanced Excel skills and you're an advanced Excel user, you want to reflect, you want to be saying that in your resume, that you're an advanced Excel user. For example, I mean, that's one very basic example. If they're talking about strong multitasking skills, you want to be referring to that in the resume, possibly more than once, maybe not 5 times, but maybe 2 or 3 times. If it's a reasonable bullet point to be putting in for, let's say, different internships you've had, for example, okay? So yes, you want, so when a resume, you talk about a resume matching what an employer wants, it doesn't mean a complete revision of your resume, not at all. Most of the time, you're only going to be able to tweak your resume about 10%. And that would be a lot, actually, for a specific employer. But you do want to do that in particular for this reason. When an employer, when you see a job description and it says, click here to apply, and you click and you find yourself in an employer's own database, and they're telling you to upload your resume into that database. That means that you are now a candidate within what's called an applicant tracking system. I think I actually covered this in another slide, but I'll talk about it now. You are going to be pulled out of that database or not pulled out of that database for further review by a human being, but the decision is going to be made by an algorithm. And the algorithms are looking for keywords and phrases. And the more of those keywords and phrases they see, which they've been told to look for, by the way, by a human resources officer usually, the more of those phrases they see, the higher your score goes. So when you're inside an applicant tracking system, when your resume is inside an applicant tracking system, you're being scored. And typically the score is on a 1-star to 5-star basis, with 5-star being the best. And research shows that generally speaking, for employers that use applicant tracking systems, they only interview people who are 4-star or 5-star candidates. So you've got to do pretty well in terms of the match of keywords and phrases in your resume with keywords and phrases in the job description. Now, what if it's an employer that's telling you to send an email? You still should be trying to reflect that language back at them, both in the cover letter and in the resume, to a reasonable degree, okay? So I hope that answers your question. If I haven't completely answered it, ask another one. I'm happy to keep going with that. That's an important point. So where were we here? Talking about applying promptly, prepare, and then you got to prepare for interviews. There's 2 ways you can do that at AU. You can ask for a mock interview with your school's career advisor, okay? If you're in SIS, they have their own career center. If you're in COGAD, they have their own career center. If you're a law student, they have their own career center. The rest of the university has the main AU career center, but we are divided up according to different responsibilities. So I do mock interviews mostly for grad students and a little bit for seniors. There's also an undergraduate advisor for SBA who does mock interviews. And there are advisors for the School of Communication, the College of Arts and Sciences, the School of Education, and I hope I haven't forgotten anybody. If I have, my apologies, but there are advisors for everybody, okay? You just need to figure out who that is. Go to the american.edu/career center, american.edu/career center, and you can figure out pretty easily who that advisor is. And you can schedule an appointment with them either via handshake, where you can see all their availability, which is really better for you to match it with your availability, or you can phone the Career Center main desk, 202-885-1804, 202-885-1804. They answer the phone 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Thursday, okay? And they can also help you schedule if you're having trouble dealing with handshake software, which really isn't that hard to do, okay? Another way to prepare for interviews in Handshake, speaking of Handshake, if you, again, look on the left side, there will be a link called resources, and you click on that, and then you will see a number of different resources, one of which is called Big Interview. Big Interview is a way of you selecting questions you want to be asked by this interview system, and then you click to start your answer, and you are recording yourself, looking at a webcam, recording your answer. And by the way, you know, just about all your interviews these days are going to be over Zoom or over Microsoft Teams, looking at a webcam. So this is really good practice. And then you get to critique yourself, by the way, doing that interview. And most people are their worst critics, which is a good thing. If you see that you're not looking at the camera, not looking at the webcam enough, or you're saying and too much because you don't know what to say, or you're talking too fast, or you're talking too slowly, or you're just not articulating well for whatever reason. You know, all those things will come out in a recording, in a video recording, okay? Then if you've been offered a job, happy circumstance, you get to engage in salary negotiations. Most of the, in fact, just about all of the career advisors throughout AU can give you some advice about salary negotiations, okay? And then you start a new job, happily and graciously, okay? And as I say, you know, in the two little circles on either side of our pyramid there, inverted pyramid, make contacts and do research. I mean, those are all critical components of focusing your job search. I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to keep going here. Now, what is a focused job hunter? That's somebody who's clear about their targeted job sectors, not surprisingly. And to some degree, you can focus more easily on specific employers, but you shouldn't be too narrow. I mean, I had somebody talking to me the other day about only wanting to work for one or two specific federal agencies, and that can be a challenge. Getting a federal job, if you are not a military veteran, is not impossible, but it is challenging. It's a lot easier for military veterans. They get certain built-in legal preferences. In addition, yes, Democrats tend to hire more people in the federal government than Republicans, but in case you haven't heard, Joe Biden's been having a lot of trouble getting his budgetary legislation through Congress. And so there hasn't been some boom in federal hiring. But by the way, overall, the job sector in DC is quite good. And there are, in my opinion, there are just about as many job seekers as there are jobs. It's a dynamic mix. There is not a huge oversupply of job seekers compared to the number of jobs. There's probably an oversupply of job seekers who are outside DC and want to get to DC, but they're at a big disadvantage, which is they're not at DC. And they also are usually not very sophisticated about how to find a job in this area, okay? Again, look for specific contacts to make. That may be through informational interviewing, or go to Alumni Fire. You know, if you want to work for employer X, go to Alumni Fire and see if there's an alumnus or alumna who works for that specific employer, and reach out to them. People who have volunteered to mentor AU students on Alumni Fire are way more likely to respond positively to that kind of informational request, as opposed to someone you would find on the LinkedIn alumni page for American University, which could be a source for you, but it's not as good because those people haven't volunteered to do anything, okay? Um, oh yeah, let's talk about internal referrals. What is an internal referral? So you've applied to employer X, and you know somebody who works there, and they are willing to go to bat for you. Okay, they're willing to put your resume in front of HR, or even potentially, in best circumstance, in front of a specific hiring manager who is hiring for a specific job. Okay, so what you want to do is use that internal referral really, I would say aggressively but elegantly. Okay. Research shows that internal referrals are 3 times as likely to be hired by an employer as someone who doesn't know anyone in that firm. In fact, let me give you an example. A company like Deloitte or Booz Allen, large, federal contractors, they have a small team in each of their HR departments dedicated to just focusing on internal referrals. And in fact, there's usually a system whereby if you're an employee there and you recommend someone to them who then gets hired, you, the employee, will get a bonus. You'll get a $500 or $1,000 bonus. Not a bad thing for not that much work. And you want to start out a cover letter when you are an internal referral needs to start out with something like, Mr. and Ms. So-and-so strongly urged me to apply for, the research assistant position at Deloitte, period. You want to have that person's name right up front and right on top so that anyone else reading it immediately understands, because these things can't get passed around, that you are an internal referral. Okay. And also from the employer's point of view, they have found that internal referrals tend to stay longer and tend to be more productive employees. So it's a win-win for the employers in that sense. This is Alumni Fire. This is what it looks like. You can sign up via LinkedIn or via Facebook or with your own email. And yeah, and that's that. And it's a networking community launched by AU, and that was longer ago than I thought, March 2018. So 3 years ago. But yeah, so think about Alumni Fire. Now, let's start thinking about how to find jobs specifically. LinkedIn is by far the best of the mainstream job engines. It's the best at filtering your searches. Indeed.com, let's put it this way, LinkedIn is very good in that sense. Indeed.com is good, but not very good. Twitter is kind of a whole different species of bird, so to speak. And we'll talk about that a bit separately. So LinkedIn, user-friendly. It's best, as I say, best of the big job search engines. Also, as I'm sure just about all of you know, it's important for you to build your online profile as well as you can. But we're talking about LinkedIn as a job search engine. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to depart for a moment from the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to bring up, and I'm pretty sure, if for some reason you can't see me using this browser, let me know, but I'm pretty sure I have this set so that everything on the desktop will show. And we're not going to launch Zoom. We already did. In fact, let's go to a different tab, and let's go to linkedin.com. Okay. So we're going to see my LinkedIn page in a moment. There it is. Here's my regular, narrative page or whatever. Now, how do you look for jobs on LinkedIn? You go up to the top and guess what? Where it says jobs. Okay. So you click there. Now, obviously, I'm already logged into LinkedIn. If you're not logged in on that browser, you're going to need to log in. This is now, you see, I use LinkedIn to look for jobs for School of Public Affairs students. So it's suggesting internships to me. Believe me, I'm not looking for internships for myself, but for students, as well as jobs, of course. And then it's suggesting other things. The problem for LinkedIn with me is that the algorithms are all over the place because I look for all kinds of jobs in different fields. So it has a difficult time getting a handle on what I want. So don't pay attention to that so much as up here. There's 2 fields. One says city, state, or zip code. The other says search by title or skill. Now, there are filters that will help you in your LinkedIn search, but you can't see them yet. And the reason is LinkedIn, in its great wisdom, has decided not to show you the filters until I identified Washington, Baltimore area. Now we're looking at all the filters, okay? So notice I haven't even yet put in a title. I'm gonna keep this quite generic. Public policy, I'm just gonna call it. I hit enter, and it says I'm getting 3,936 results in the DC area. Now we start to filter. The most important filter is date posted. And notice your options. Anytime, past month, past week, past 24 hours. Forget about any time. That could be 6 months ago. Past month, probably not. Maybe the first time you use this, you might look for past month. Past 24 hours, I would only be using that if you were using LinkedIn every single day, which most of you probably, it's just too tedious to do that every day. So, you know, the Goldilocks principle of not too hot, not too cold, just right. Past week is probably the best thing. And now it tells me I've narrowed it from 3,000, whatever it was, down to 893, and I click enter. So now I'm down to, well, it says 891 jobs, okay? Experience level, okay? Am I looking entry level, associate, etc.? Now, what's the difference between entry level and associate? Entry level is entry level, okay? If you're a senior coming out of, graduating in May or December, and you pretty much only have internship experience, which might be quite significant internship experience, you're looking for entry level job, quite probably, absent some other high level skills. If you're in computer programming and you're certified in a lot of different software, maybe you're looking at higher than entry level. But most students are going to be looking at entry level. Associate, which is a question I get asked a lot by graduate students, well, that's the next level up, right? Typically, at minimum 3 to 5, 6, 7 years experience. You could try clicking on both. You don't have to just click on one. But for purposes of what we're doing today, I'm just going to click on entry level. Now notice we're down to 189 results, okay? Now, company, do not use this filter. Why? Because it takes you down to a specific employer. This is a lobbying firm, if I remember correctly. The city of Baltimore, I don't know what that's doing there. SAIC, a big federal, mostly defense contractor. Allstate Insurance, okay? You don't want to do this. So do not use the company filter at all, ever, in my opinion. Job type, for some reason they want you to well, this time, you're not talking about the level of job, but you're almost certainly looking for a full-time job, so that's bad, okay? By the way, if you're still going to be in the market for an internship, you could be clicking that. Now we're down to 164 jobs. Now, on-site or remote, I strongly recommend you do not use this filter. Why? I mean, if you've got a medical condition where working in an office could be a serious danger to your health, then probably you do want to click on remote. But other than that circumstance, I would not use this. And the reason is I have seen job descriptions all over the place for several months now where some jobs are hybrid or remote and the employer doesn't even mention it. They usually, if they want you to be fully on site, 5 days a week, they will mention that. But a lot of times they're not mentioning that maybe they want you in the office 2 days a week, or maybe it's fully remote, or maybe you've got an option, okay? Don't click on this. It's going to be looking for words like hybrid, remote, or virtual, most likely. And if an employer doesn't use those words, it's not going to be helpful. And you may inadvertently filter out things that you otherwise would want to see, okay? So forget about that filter. And these other filters, easy apply. Don't bother with that stuff. I barely know what it is. There's one other thing I want to talk about. So we've used public policy, Washington, D.C. We came up with 164 results. And then I'm not going to go through this, but obviously you can see how it works. You click on, let's find, and notice, by the way, these algorithms are not perfect. I clicked on entry level and it's giving me public or policy program manager. That's typically mid-level job. Associate consultant, blah, blah, blah. That's an associate level job. Operations analyst might be an entry level job, maybe. So we click on that, and what happens is we get a full description down here. And that's where you decide, do I want to apply for this job? And it will tell you, notice the information you get. It's entry level. This is how big. IFC is a big international development contractor, mainly for the U.S. Agency for International Development. It tells me that I have one connection among the people who are linked to me, but most of the people who are linked to me are former students of mine from when I was an adjunct professor, as well as people who worked for me when I was executive for a long time, mostly in Europe. But it tells me if I have any connections. And it also tells me, notice this, 6 people have already applied, okay? And this was posted, or at least it was posted on LinkedIn, only about 4 hours ago. And as it says, 6 applicants. That doesn't mean you shouldn't apply. 6 applicants is not a lot of applicants, okay? If there were 500 applicants, maybe you shouldn't apply. And it does say still actively recruiting, right? So you could either save it in your LinkedIn account, or you could apply right there and then. What I would recommend, for example, is, let's say you wanted to apply for this job. Go back to the left side, right click, and open in a new tab. So now I don't need to show you the other tab. We've opened a tab just for this job. And you can leave that there and then keep looking further down. And maybe this job with an interesting company, EVgo, that is building a nationwide network of electric vehicle charging stations. Probably, a business that's really going to grow. Interesting job. It's entry level. 2 alumni are working there, by the way. Interesting. And 10 people have already applied. When was it posted? 15 hours ago. Okay. So again, right click, open a new tab, and you've saved it in that tab to come back to later while you're still doing your search. And by the way, notice that you're only seeing about 20 jobs in each column here. And so you're going to look at 6 or 7 different pages of openings because there's 164 results. All right. One last thing. Let's say you've looked at these results with the filters on, and you've said to yourself, boy, this is a pretty good search. This is returning me good stuff. Then you want to look at this little notice here that says job alert off with this white dot that's kind of begging for you to slide it over. If you slide it over, you're going to create an automatic email alert for yourself. In this case, for the search term public policy, only in Washington, D.C. area, posted within the past week, entry level and full-time. Okay, but you want to be sure those filters are in there, because let's say you didn't specify how far back you wanted to look. You would keep seeing the same jobs over and over again that were posted 5 months ago. You'd see that for a long time. So you want to limit that. And that's the best way to use LinkedIn. I'm going to keep going, and I want to show you one other thing. And I have to bring this down so I can actually see what I'm doing here. I want to very briefly, not in as much detail, talk about Indeed.com, which, as I say, can be pretty good. Now, Indeed knows me because I use it a lot, again, for finding positions for people in School of Public Affairs. And we moved your recent searches. I don't really care. Here is very obvious. All right, job title, where, Washington, D.C. So you're going to, well, not job title, keywords. It could be a job title. You could be searching for all kinds of things, right? Terms like researcher, research assistant, research associate, policy analyst, things like that come to mind, because those are the kind of terms that the student side advisor are often looking for. Or you can look under subject matter, climate advocacy, or you could look for if it's a really large employer, you could look for the Red Cross or AARP, that sort of thing. And then it works exactly the same way. You click on a position, and there's the full description, okay? And then, good option here, apply on company site. So I would right-click, open a new tab, and then there's the job. This happens to be at a conservative think tank in DC. that's looking for a research assistant, full-time job in poverty studies. And that's that. Not much of a description, actually. But then it tells you where to go to do a full application. So that's how this works. Very similar to them. And also the filters. I guess you need to do a filter. I mean, excuse me, just like, yeah, exactly like LinkedIn, you've got to start a search. So now I've started a search, and here's all the filters. Date posted, just like LinkedIn. Don't use the remote filter. Here you get an option. What radius around DC or whatever city you're looking in do you want to be looking for? If you're looking in DC, I recommend 25 miles. 50 miles gets you all the way to Baltimore, and you probably don't want to be looking for jobs in Baltimore, and there aren't very many jobs there anyway. 100 miles, I think, gets you to Philadelphia, maybe New York, and probably not New York. 5 miles, you know, that's just the center of DC. So 25 miles is what I would recommend for a radius around DC. I would not fool with salary estimate. It's really hard to predict what jobs are going to pay, and a lot of times employers will give absolutely no hint of that. I would leave that alone. Job type, okay, you're looking for a full-time job, right? Benefits, I would just leave this alone. You know, if you got a full-time job and it's not a consultancy, yeah, you're gonna get paid time off, and you're gonna get health insurance and dental insurance. You might not get vision insurance. You know, forget about that stuff. It's important, but you don't want to be making that part of your job search. Then location, I already said Washington, D.C., but then it gives me all these other options like Rockville and McLean and Chantilly, where the Dulles Airport is. Click on Washington, D.C. again, or whatever city you're looking in. Forget about the company filter. It's the exact same thing as LinkedIn. It narrows you down to one employer, like MedStar Health. And experience level, your choices are not as narrowly defined as they are in LinkedIn. If you really are a mid-level, then click on that. But for most of you, it's going to be entry level, okay? And I'm going to do the same thing just to test this out. So public policy. And I have these same filters in, and it's coming up with 888 jobs. I can't remember what LinkedIn was. I don't think it was that many jobs. So it's giving me more, which could mean there are more jobs here, or it could mean that their algorithms aren't working as well. It depends. But I'll tell you from just from scrolling here, it looks like these jobs, this search is more relevant. Oh, maybe I didn't click on, did I click on date? Oh yeah, date posted. I did not click on that. So here's your choices: 24 hours, 3 days, 7 days. If you were to use LinkedIn twice a week, click on 3 days. If you're going to use it once a week, click on 7 days. The furthest back you can go is 14 days. Now we are down to 125, which I think is a lot closer to what LinkedIn was finding here. And that's that. Sometimes you don't get the option to apply on a company site. I'll try to find one that doesn't. Where is it? They're all coming up this way. There's one. Okay, so apply now. You click on that, and you're applying via Indeed's system, which is okay. Indeed is, a legitimate employer, and that's that. So let's get back to the PowerPoint presentation. Give me a moment to make this full screen, and there we go. Twitter. Let's talk about Twitter. You can create a multitude of information streams on Twitter. And I'm talking about Twitter where you're getting information mostly, not necessarily where you're tweeting a lot, all right? A lot of people they think Twitter is a time sink and a waste of time. And used in certain ways, it certainly is a waste of time. Getting into flaming arguments with people online that kind of go nowhere. I mean, who needs it, right? Maybe some of you do, but you need to use it efficiently because there's a lot of ways to use it inefficiently, okay? This is just, a basic page. No, excuse me, that's LinkedIn. We're gonna go past that. And there's more of LinkedIn, and we'll get past that, and more of LinkedIn. Oh yeah, a couple other things maybe I should say about LinkedIn before we move on to Twitter. The narrative profile of you should be good and absolutely flawless. No typos, no misspellings, no grammatical errors. Have somebody read it. Somebody else read it besides you. It's easy to overlook a typo of yours, or if you've accidentally spelled a present tense word into past tense. Okay. If you are an international student and English is not your native language, have somebody who is a native English speaker read over your essay, your narrative profile of yourself on LinkedIn. Build your network on LinkedIn. That means offer to link with people whom you know, link with professors, link with, if you're in internships, link with people you're working with. And they will usually accept, the offer. It's not like Facebook where they're your friend and it's more personal. LinkedIn is very much a professional sort of thing. Also, there is a place in your LinkedIn profile where you are encouraged to select skill sets that you have. Writing, editing, certain scientific skills, software skills, etc. You identify those skills and you put them up there on LinkedIn, and people have the opportunity to endorse you for that skill. How do you get them to endorse you? You endorse them for their skill sets. And what it does, and this is amazing, I've done this a few times in my life, where I've gone into contacts of mine, mainly former colleagues, and endorse them for their skill sets, not for every skill set, but maybe a lot of things. And then amazingly, they start endorsing me. Why? Because I have guilt tripped them into endorsing me. So it works quite well. And it's a good thing to have those skill sets up there and to have a certain amount. It doesn't have to be 100 people endorsing you for your writing skills. It could just be 10, but that's still okay. Also, there's a way to get recommendations on LinkedIn, which typically should only be a couple hundred words, maybe 2 paragraphs, by former supervisors or colleagues or professors. And the neat thing about doing this is you should ask someone either in person or by email, would you be willing to write a recommendation for me, just a couple hundred words, in which you could highlight my research and writing skills if you feel comfortable doing that. Would be that kind of an email. So they agree, and you also give them a link to the place they would go on your LinkedIn profile where they would type in a recommendation. Then when they're done with it, they click submit. That does not post it on your LinkedIn profile. It sends you a message that that person has written an endorsement of you, and do you want to review it? And then you review it, and if you like it, you put it up on your profile, okay? And 2 or 3 or 5 years later, it can be irrelevant and you can take it down. But particularly if you go into any kind of independent work, I have a good friend who is an independent consultant. He lives and dies with people endorsing his work who are former clients of his. And he probably has 150 people endorsing the kind of management consulting that he does, which is mainly directed at nonprofit managers. And it's very important to him, but it can be important to a lesser degree for a lot of people, okay? Indeed.com. Some of the things I say there are a little bit outdated, but let me just mention this. Limit your search to the last 7 days, as I mentioned before. Limit your search radius to 25 miles. Use good search terms. And the other things I've already gone over, I don't think I need to repeat them. And again, this is Indeed, as we've seen, that's a screen capture. Now, Twitter. I recommend that you create, if you have a personal Twitter account that has, a lot of goofy personal stuff on it, I would create a separate professional Twitter account where the only thing you tweet is professionally relevant content about yourself or observations about things that are happening in the field that you're interested in. And I would recommend that you follow employers and people relevant to your career. If you're interested in working for AARP, follow AARP. Maybe the CEO of AARP has their own Twitter account. Follow them. Maybe you want to follow the human resources departments of certain employers because they will sometimes, believe it or not, post jobs on Twitter. And they also might make more informal comments about, well, we're really looking for somebody who has X amount of experience doing this and that. And you can gain some insights that sometimes are not obvious from a job description. Follow the accounts of targeted employers that you are targeting on Twitter, and stay focused. Don't follow 200 employers. It's just going to be too much stuff. You're not going to be paying much attention to it. You'll get overwhelmed and you'll probably stop using it. So try to keep the number of employers that you're using under control, that you're following under control. And oh yeah, a shameless promotion here. For those of you who are, this is open to all AU students and all AU recent alumni, but nobody other than that. I maintain a private Twitter account called @AU_SBA careers. Okay. I tweet 350 jobs and internships per month that are mainly relevant to the School of Public Affairs, but may have some relevance to people in the College of Arts and Sciences, School of International Service, School of Communications, for example. And if you'd like to, the way to get access to it is you go to that address and it's going to say tweets are protected. To gain access, click follow. Okay, so you click follow and that will send me a direct message on Twitter. And assuming that your Twitter handle somewhat resembles your name, I will grant you access. But if I can't figure out who you are, I won't give you access. So if you have some kind of odd Twitter handle that bears no resemblance to your name, what you want to do is the following. I'm going to type in my email address. It's in the chat right now. Robert.SanGeorge@American.edu. So if you've got a Twitter handle and you want to access a Twitter handle that does not reflect what your name is, which means I can't check the registrar's database to see that you're actually a student or recent alum, then send me an email and say, hey, my Twitter handle is such and such, and I just requested access. Okay. But don't just send me an email. You have to request the access. That's the way Twitter works. I can't just grant you access without you asking for it. It's not possible, as far as I know, with Twitter. Okay. There are other AU career resources on Twitter. As I mentioned, my account, AU_SBA careers, which is private. The other accounts are not private. They are wide open. There's an SIS careers, SOC careers, CIS careers, ProGod Biz, and there's a main AU Career Center Twitter account, which doesn't necessarily post many jobs or internships, but posts a lot of career relevant information. Okay. Examples of job feeds. Oh yeah, if you're going to use Twitter, it can get complicated. So for example, you can follow @USA Jobs or Fed Careers or US Office of Personnel Management. Probably a lot of overlapping content there, and you probably want to see which one is the best. But for example, there's all this stuff. Democratic Gain is a Democratic related jobs board. The Right Jobs obviously is conservative. Think tank jobs, criminal justice jobs. Some are hashtags, some are not. And then geographically, DC jobs, Maryland jobs, Virginia jobs, etc., Miami jobs. Okay, all those are open possibilities to you. But it can get nuanced. Should you follow public health jobs, all lowercase, hashtag public health jobs, or hashtag public health jobs with 3 capitalizations? Those both exist. Or should you follow San Francisco jobs, all lowercase, or San Francisco jobs with a capital S and a capital F? Okay. You can only figure that out yourself as to which is more worthwhile, and maybe you want to follow both. All right. Now, how to interact effectively and professionally with people via direct message, DM, on Twitter, which usually means HR people who have posted stuff on a Twitter account. Always be very professional, always be upbeat, enthusiastic, and ask thoughtful questions about, if they've just posted a job, about a particular job they might have just, mentioned on Twitter. And how to set up a job Twitter internship search. Basically, it's by following a lot of places. Yes, you can obviously skim Twitter on your phone, but you're never going to apply for a job on your phone. So I recommend you don't try to do it on your phone, and that you actually sit down in front of a laptop. I know that's a real 1990s thing to do, but anyway, and you organize Twitter bookmarks on a browser, starting with, San Francisco jobs or New York jobs or whatever it is, whatever the hashtag is, or the address is that you want to be looking at. Handshake, very quickly, because I know a lot of you are familiar with it. Handshake, you may not know, uses artificial intelligence over time to predict jobs and internships or career events that you may be interested in. Kind of similar to the way Amazon.com works. You probably know, you buy something on Amazon.com and then it asks you whether you want to buy 5 more of the same thing from different vendors, which is a little ridiculous. This is not that. But if you have uploaded your resume into Handshake, and if you start using Handshake to apply for things, then the artificial intelligence algorithms will get to know you and will begin suggesting things to you, which may or may not be helpful. I mean, you can only give it a shot. You can always turn it off. It's mobile friendly, and there are several thousand jobs and internships posted during the past year that have been posted just on the AU Handshake. And as you may know, a lot of universities are using Handshake. Get ready for artificial intelligence interviewing. This is a coming thing, particularly in the corporate sector and even with some large nonprofits. What does this mean? What does artificial intelligence do? You're told by an employer, within the next 5 days, click on this link and do an interview with this software. And so you sit down and you do it. And you get in front of, you're in front of your screen, hopefully fairly relaxed, and then questions will come at you, usually just in writing. Depending on how sophisticated the system is, it could be actually a video recording of a person asking a question. And then it tells you something like you've got 10 seconds to click start to start your answer. You click start, you answer. When you're done, you click stop. A lot of times they will limit the amount of time you have to make an answer. Might be 60 seconds, might be 45 seconds, could be 2 minutes. You'll have to pay attention to that. And usually there will be a clock in the screen ticking down. All right. What is the software doing? It's doing things such as, how much do you use filler words? Etc. Not etc. Words like that. And those are negatives, by the way, in a job interview. Use of other kind of repetitive words that have unfortunately lapsed into our language, such as like, or or really, and when it sees you using words like that also as kind of filler, that's another negative. It will be kind of shooting little, I don't know what to call it at you, not lasers exactly, but it's tracking the movements of your face. Do you have facial tics? Do you blink too much, which can indicate you're nervous? What percentage of the time are you making eye contact with a webcam? What does your posture look like? It will make certain judgments on that just from seeing you from here up. How much are you smiling? Smiling too much is a negative, but not smiling enough, which is something a lot of people have a problem with, especially when they're talking to software and not to a real person, have trouble smiling. It's kind of a bit of an acting job, okay? I mean, think about highly experienced presenters on television. Think about Anderson Cooper on CNN. When he's talking into what is essentially a black hole of that camera, he's been able to train himself to talk as if he's talking to you and you're sitting on your easy chair at home and you feel a connection with him. That's because he's a professional. You're not at doing that sort of thing, but you do the best you can, okay? The employer will get an automated evaluation report. The software doesn't tell the employer yes or no, all right? What the software does is says it evaluates according to scores, metrics, on things like use of filler words. Also, by the way, use of jargon that is relevant to that job, which is a good thing, okay? It will make judgments about how at ease you are, how anxious you are, and this will all be part of a report. And by the way, the good news is you can practice this with AI software. There's something called Big Interview that I mentioned before. And when you get into Big Interview, there's a way to identify that you want to do an AI interview, which will pretty much be the same questions, but at the end of that interview, you will get a report that is somewhat similar to the kind of report an reports an employer would get from an AI system. And so if you've got an AI interview coming up, this is a really valuable thing to do. Try to anticipate what the questions will be that you might be asked, practice them, and then get that AI feedback. Really useful, in my opinion. Other tools, idealist.org. It's a good but rather small job board only for the nonprofit sector. It is not very good for internships, by the way. It's right now they're tweeting 25 or 30 jobs a day, 5 days a week in the DC area. Glassdoor.com, you may be wondering why I haven't mentioned it. It's not as good as Indeed. It sometimes gives you too much information, but it's really useful for searching for information about what are the interviews like with a particular employer. What do they pay? It has better information about what questions you can expect to be asked from medium-sized and large employers. Small employers is probably not going to have much. And also, what are the salary levels for particular kinds of jobs? Better information on Glassdoor than anywhere else you would look. I'm not sure why I mentioned the SBA Career Resources intranet, which is not on Blackboard anymore, it's on Canvas. That's only if you're an SBA student. And as I mentioned before, any AU student or alum can access the SBA Alumni intranet or our Twitter account. If you want access to the Alumni intranet, send an email to au.sbacareers@gmail.com. Our Alumni intranet has about 250 career-related documents that are available to you 24/7, okay? Career advising appointments. I mean, those are available to you. They're mostly on Zoom. I can't speak to what the career centers are doing other than the main AU Career Center, but you can do in-person appointments 2 days a week, typically, but not if you're an alum. There's some restrictions about coming onto campus if you're not a student. So alumni have to do Zoom appointments no matter what. Students can do in-person appointments. I will tell you candidly, I've been back in the office 2 days a week since mid-August, so 7 or 8 weeks now. And I've only had 4 in-person appointments, and 3 of them were people who didn't show up for the appointment. So not many people are doing in-person appointments anymore. So that's okay. But I'm available via Zoom, both on the days that I'm in the office and on the days that I'm not in the office when I'm working from home. Okay, and that's the way it is for all the career advisors, at least in the main AU Career Center. You'll have to inquire with KOGAD and the Law School Career Center and the SIS Career Center as to how they're handling things. And yeah, I'm this is my email address down there again. And anything else? Oh, summer job search series. That was last summer. Forget about it. So look, I'm done. I'm not going to hang around to wait to see whether anybody has any more questions on chat. If you wanted to email me a question and it doesn't require me to write a memo to you, that address that's down in the chat, robert.sangeorge@american.edu. Again, if you are not in SAS, not in KOGAD, and not in the law school, you can make an appointment on Handshake or by calling the main front desk of the AU Career Center, 202-885-1804, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Thursday. Okay, so that's it. Thank you very much, and good luck in your job hunting.